to Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Audrey Tang.
And I'm Judith Crozier.
And this is the show where we discuss all things mental health and well-being. And if you're listening to us on podcast as well, welcome to you too. You can pop over to our YouTube channel and see us live there as well. Now, today we are talking about leadership, and in particular, why the wrong leaders get promoted.
Interesting.
Have you ever worked under a wrong leader?
Yeah, I'd say quite a few times.
Same.
Yes, I have.
And what was it like?
I find it very difficult to hide my feelings. So if there's clearly the wrong leader there, then it shows on my face, and so the relationship kind of breaks down before it even starts. And reflecting on, I can go back and I can recognise that now. So that's kind of how it was.
I'm the same as you. Because you sit there and you just go, I could do this better.
Well, yes, or you can clearly see someone else that could do it better as well.
Yes.
And then if they're in the wrong position, if they shouldn't be leading people, there's never going to be respect there, is there?
Which brings me to the next question: is what tells you it's wrong? What bad behaviours have you seen, or just behaviours where you just go, you should not be?
Well, one example was back in my recruitment days, so that's a whole world in itself. But the interview was great, very professional. Two men interviewing me, very professional. Got the job, started, and in the first minute at my actual first day, I realised that he's just a child.
Oh no!
And just awful, inappropriate. He'd shout out the window at women and stuff like that, and it just went on, and so we were never going to get on because I couldn't hide how I felt about him, and I just thought, what are you doing being my manager or being anyone's manager? So
what role modelling are you actually doing?
Exactly. So what about you?
Oh, mine was you will know this person because we have worked in what is that? It was somebody who just kept things from you.
Okay.
So things would be relevant to your department and your work, and they would have been discussed with somebody else and not you.
Oh my goodness me.
And then and unfortunately with some bad leaders, they don't realise that other people do make friends and other people do talk to each other.
Yes.
That's how I got to hear about these other things.
Right.
And then I find out it was a don't tell Audrey. And it's it concerns me. I'm the head of this department.
Oh my goodness.
Why are you telling other people not to tell me?
Exactly, and not telling you in the first place. You're kind of being set up to fail in that scenario.
Absolutely.
That's really bad.
And then paranoia, you start questioning, is it me personally or is it just poor leadership?
Yes, and in that case, it was definitely the latter.
Poor leadership.
Yeah,
agreed.
Sure.
But those are some of the behaviours that I've seen. There's other behaviours when I was delivering training to leaders, and two of them just got really funny. We were talking about recruitment, and two of them got really, and I did that teacher thing. So would you like to share what you're talking about? And one of them went, it was so funny. Do you remember that time we were trying to recruit all of those nurses, and then we didn't book a room? And all these nurses turned up from the university, and we didn't have anywhere to put them, and it was so funny. And we have a nurse shortage.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not funny in any way, is it?
All.
No.
And the fact that they found it so funny and were willing to share this in a training session at the very establishment they've clearly messed it all up in, that's beyond me. That. Whether it's confidence or just, idiocy, pure idiocy is beyond me.
Well, if you can't even book a meeting room. I mean, mistakes happen.
Yeah.
But to find it funny,
to
that's
laugh
the thing,
about
isn't it? Yeah.
And not even think about these poor people. When you go for an interview, you're already nervous anyway. And then what kind of first impression? And then I did ask them that, actually. I said, well, what sort of impression did you think that gave off the trust? Oh, it would have been awful. Yes, and
exactly.
Any more you'd get? You just sort of think, and this is why we have the problem.
Yeah, I know.
So, our guest today is Rob Stevens, and he is going to be talking to us from Optix Solutions about why the wrong leaders rise. Let's meet him. Rob, welcome. It's great to chat with you as always. Thank you for being here on Mental Health Matters.
Thanks very much for having me back.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And this is such a spicy topic. It's a great topic to talk about.
Yeah.
We've already shared our leadership experiences under problematic leaders.
Yes.
What for you are poor leadership traits?
Oh, there's a big list here, isn't there? And
There
I think
is.
everyone will have their own opinions and experiences here.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the top ones is going to be when people are insincere or disingenuous.
Yes.
It's so difficult to kind of know particularly if somebody's sort of like the smiling assassin, where they end up sort of pretending to be your friend, but actually, what they're actively doing is trying to sort of destroy your career or your image or whatever. And that's very difficult. Because I think if you challenge these people openly, they'll absolutely deny that that's what they're doing. But then 5 minutes later, you'll probably overhear them saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe Rob just called me out on that. What an absolute, put your own swear word here."
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely right. No, that's a huge one. And then there's also disingenuous. Another example of poor leadership was a thank you after everything, but instead of really finding something to actually thank people over, it felt like they read a leadership book which said you must thank people, and they were literally like, "Thank you for wearing that jacket."
Oh my
God.
God.
It was that bad. It was that bad. And that was so disingenuous. It was just embarrassing for them.
Whoever you are, nameless employee, you've had a great year, but I don't know your name.
Yeah, exactly.
Just well done you.
Yes, it is. Well done you. Well done you. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, great example. And with that, that's a good example to use. Why do organisations go, well, clearly that person is fit for leadership? Why do they end up promoting the wrong types of leaders?
Oh, gosh. So I think it's a multifaceted sort of answer to this one. But I think a part of it is that often these people are very smart, very clever, very capable. But I think they apply their skills in perhaps the wrong way, and become manipulative in a way that they're almost able to hit a switch. It's almost, borderline kind of psychotic, right? Where they're able to sort of be one person one moment, and then as soon as maybe, somebody in a more senior position turns up, they completely transform. And it's like somebody's just gone click. Yes. And then this other character appears and they're wonderful. And you're like, oh my, where's this person come from? If you can be like that, why are you not like that? And then obviously maybe the senior leader disappears and that manager suddenly reverts back to type. And it's like, right, you lot, back to it, and you're like, hang on a minute.
Where did that go?
Yeah.
I think that's right, actually, because again, this reminds me of another leader I had. Now, luckily, the person in charge of him was better, but he was very much like that. In front of the students, he was all jolly and happy. I'm the head of department. I'm your mate, which I think rang alarm bells in the first place. But absolutely got no work done. No marking was done. No second marking. So it ended up being. He got suspended in the end because he got found out that nothing was being done. Okay. But to all intents and purposes, everything was under control. Yeah, I've got that. That's totally okay. And then what happened was I ended up having to do the first set of marking, and then my actual head of department, she did the second mark.
Yeah.
Wow, you had to clear up what he left behind.
These are common, aren't they? I think, everyone will have a story like this and have probably worked with someone like this. So the challenge is, though, that these individuals, they're very good at self-promotion. They're very good at being seen in the right places at the right moment. Yes. They identify opportunities for self-advancement often quicker than others. Yes. And they it works, right? We've all seen what happens here, but actually, when you scrape past that veneer, that polish, underneath really is not somebody suitable for management, leadership, coaching, because that's not what they're there for. What they're there for is for self-improvement. And I don't mean by in a good sense. I mean self-advancement, as in they're there purely for their own purposes, not for anyone else or for their team. And they won't make any. They won't have any issues with sort of telling you like how lovely their holiday home is or how their latest skiing trip was, and the new company car that they have has been fantastic, and obviously the bonuses really help, and
Yes.
you know, and it's
It is.
but it's on the back of other people's work, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's why it grates, I think, and that's why I think whenever anyone's experienced it, it's very difficult to let it go because it just eats away at sort of every fibre of you. So we've all got those war stories, I think.
Yes.
Exactly. Can I just say, when I was 18, I was in a job and there was a girl, exactly, she was my level, my age, everything. And whenever the managers came along, she just was like really loud and, you know, really bossy. And then obviously she got promoted. Yes. And I said to my manager once, you know, it's not fair because I'm like 10 times more a hard worker. He went, you'll learn. He said, you have to change your personality if you want to get anywhere. You have to be like her. And obviously I didn't. I'm me. But it's just that really grates.
It really does.
It really grates.
That the world responds to the system.
Yes, the
and
person that shouts the loudest.
Not to the actual work that needs to be done.
Exactly right. So yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I'm sure she probably boasted about her cars and her, you know, ski trips. So in the real world then, what kind of impact does that have on the rest of the co-workers' mental health and the well-being?
You know, the honest answer, I think, is it can be devastating. You know, often those who are impacted most are the ones who really care. So the diligent, the hard worker, maybe the less confident, the ones who really, you know, well, I have to kind of watch my language, but those who actually give a shit.
Yes,
and
you're right.
saying,
You can say that. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to be in this environment, and they leave. So, and then what happens is the character assassination of that individual afterwards to say, well, actually, you know, they were never really very committed. And it almost like advances the individual who caused that problem even further to say, well, you know, it was actually all of my work that really drove this. And, you know, they were never really that committed. I was always having to pick things up for them. And, you know, it's probably a good thing they've left anyway. And then the next victim is sort of recruited and brought into that. So unfortunately, if this isn't sort of called out and recognized, then it just carries on, right? And as an individual, you have to kind of decide, I think, ultimately, are you prepared to be in that environment, or are you going to sort of up sticks and move and try and find a different leader with a different set of kind of personality traits? And I think, you know, sadly, it's a huge thing for many people to put themselves through that kind of process. And so they will quite often go through months, if not years, of this kind of situation without really sort of doing much about it. And apart from perhaps maybe going home and telling all their friends and family about how awful their boss is, which doesn't really fix anything. So, I think, you know, on the extreme side of things, it can be really, really bad. I think, you know, maybe perhaps on the lighter side, you know, people, if they're brave enough, might try and have a word with this individual or to try and see if they can kind of break the cycle. But you know, I've been an employee for 25 years of my sort of 30-year working career, and so I've been there. You know, I've been that team member, you know, on minimum wage, you know, where you've got a boss who's been in there for a very long time, and that's just the way it is, and you can't see any sort of way forward. And perhaps you might have been brave enough to speak to HR, but that didn't get taken seriously, or, you know, you put something in your yearly review, but that got ignored as well, and you just think, well, you know what? Nobody's listening here, so I think, you know. But I remember being in a role for 3 or 4 years and just thinking, this is mad. It's absolutely mad. And if I look back now, I'm like, why did I put up with that? You know, it's crazy. But I think I needed the job. You know, I needed some kind of security. I didn't want to, and I didn't feel confident enough, I think, to kind of put myself out there and go for things. But actually, did the business and that leader help me? No, they just took advantage of it, left me on minimum wage, and I plodded along for, you know, 3 or 4 years or whatever it was. You know, anyway, sorry, I'm getting personal now.
No, I think people will resonate with that.
Yes,
very
and
much.
I think also you can hope things are going to, you know, give it a couple of months, things will get better. Things will change. They'll realise the error of their ways, and of course it never does.
No, that's the sunk cost bias. It never happens.
No. So what should ideal leadership skills look like other than all of
Yeah, and
that.
again, this is completely subjective, isn't it? And I've given this some real thought. It's been in my mind, front of mind, for a number of weeks now. I'm currently studying for a master's in leadership, and so I'm reflecting on this a lot. And yeah, I think probably the first thing for me, if I had to sort of name my top three, and these are my personal top three, right? So number one, I'm going to go with communication.
Yeah.
Because I think if you can't communicate effectively, then you can't build a team around you. You can't expect anyone to follow you because they won't understand who you are or what you're doing or why. So number one, communication. And that's sadly lacking in many, many leaders.
Yep.
They think they're great communicators, which is even worse. But yeah, so let's try number one, communication. I think number two, and we perhaps skirted around this today, but I would say humility.
Yes.
Because if you haven't got humility, then you haven't got an open mind. You already think you're the finished article when you're clearly not. And it's impossible for somebody like that to learn or to be mentored or coached. You can't work with somebody who lacks humility, right? And they also are never wrong, which is incredible, isn't it? Right. So that also creates its own problem. And I think number three for me is problem solving. Because if you can't fix things when they go wrong, and they will go wrong, and they are going wrong, then of what use are you? You know, why are you even in that leadership role? Like, if you can't, if you can't get shit done, why are you there? Right? What the hell right have you got to be there if you're not going to roll your sleeves up and make things happen? So that's my top three. So there you go.
No, I think that's great. What would you say to someone who said, and maybe it's a small business, and so they say, actually, my team respond better when I'm dictatorial, and they respond better when I'm like that. Or you just need a situation where someone is laser focused on the task. Is that a case of just that is situational leadership? That is what the team looks like. That's how they're responding, or is that going to open a door to problems later?
I think it very much is about environment and suitability, right? So it's about making sure that is appropriate for the environment and the timing that you're in. So, for example, if you're in a bomb disposal team and you're then, in a life and death situation, then absolutely that is the way that you need to be, because you're protecting lives and every second matters. Or perhaps you're in A&E, and you're a surgeon or something like that. So yeah, go for it. Completely suitable, completely appropriate. If you're the office manager of a stationery firm
or a charity,
what are you doing? Like, where do you think you are? Like, this is just completely inappropriate and unnecessary behavior. You're not in a life and death situation. People and lives aren't at risk in every second. That heightened sense of danger doesn't have any place in where you are. The most likely thing is you might get a stapler stuck in your thumb or raise your knee on the office desk. It's just. Yeah, I think people just need a reality check in those situations. And then, but if they've never had anyone sort of like question them, then they just don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? And sometimes these conversations can be extremely awkward and painful, and yes, there's going to be a big fallout in the beginning, but that's better to get that done and move forward than to keep with the status quo.
Absolutely. No, you make some very good points, and these are points which other guests have reiterated in the past, especially in third sector, where you've got charities you've got somebody who's so used to bossing people about, and now they're suddenly working with volunteers, and there's a very different aspect. We are keeping you, Rob, and we will be back right after a wellbeing tip from one of our guest experts.
So the starting premise when I work with managers is don't just react to the symptom. Think about what emotion is or feelings are behind that, because that's where you've got to get to. That's the good stuff that you've got to get to. And then it sounds simple, and I know it's sometimes easy said than done, but actually very early on agreeing kind of ground rules, ways of working as a team, but also one-on-one, because it, I like to respect the uniqueness of each human being.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. We are here with Rob Stevens from Optix Solutions, and we're talking about why the wrong leaders get promoted, what poor leadership traits look like, and I'm sure you will have your own stories. If you'd like to put them in the comments, please do. We will share them on later shows. But Rob, how do you support organisations in selecting and promoting genuinely effective leaders?
Yeah, so I think something I mentioned earlier, I'll repeat that back, but it's around alignment, and it's about making sure that when we select that leader, before we've even had that conversation, we need to really think about the type of environment we've got and the tasks that are going to be needed. And we have to have a very honest, open and collaborative conversation to understand the environment. So we talked before about, are we in an A&E or a bottle disposal team, or are we in an office in a stationary kind of distributors? Because they're completely different environments. So the type of leader for one place is not going to be appropriate in another. Yes, they might have some transferable skills, but if they can't switch between their operating mode, then we're going to have a lot of what I call friction. And from that friction creates kind of impact and heat, and sometimes that might be good. Like you might genuinely be dropping a leader in there to shape change in a short time frame, but that can't then continue for the long term over many months and years. You have to kind of be able to have that ability to be more of a sort of chameleon shapeshifter from your leader, and that's why leadership's so hard, because you have to be constantly self-reflective and emotionally aware of your environment to be able to wear many different hats and try to adopt the right approach for the right situation. And that's why it's incredibly hard.
It is, no, absolutely. And then to add another aspect to this is neurodiversity, because if you are neurodivergent, you might find the skills perfectly easy to do and teach. But the emotional intelligence, maybe you don't see that there is a place for it. And again, it's not that you don't want to learn, but it is just your brain isn't wired in that particular way. So how do we support somebody who is neurodivergent, is in that leadership position, wants to develop those skills, but is just really struggling with them?
Good question.
Yeah. And I think that's about the feedback loop, okay? So it's about being ready to accept feedback for what feedback is, without attaching the emotional responses to it, but let's just use it as a data set of which we're going to apply a regulated factual response to say, this is a valid piece of data because, whatever, we've assessed it, it's come in frequently, it's come in from a credible source. Thank you very much. I need to go away, reflect on that, and I will then come back to you with a proposed response. But this is almost impossible to do in the moment, because if you're stood in front of a team meeting and, the proverbials hit the fan and there's 100 people staring at you expecting a response in the next 1 or 2 seconds, it is incredibly difficult to do. So it's about identifying potential stresses and situations where perhaps you're not going to be at your best, and finding other ways to communicate what may need to be done in that situation. So it's about creating the environment and giving yourself the best chance to be able to be effective in those environments, but also recognizing potential challenges, particularly if you are neurodivergent, about creating the world that works for you, as opposed to trying to fit into something where perhaps you already know there's going to be potential hazards. So it's about being open and honest about those and creating the right environment.
I love that. And that the right environment can be as simple as, I am neurodivergent, I will respond in this particular way. Please don't take it personally. Give me a time to go away and think about it. It can just be having that conversation.
Exactly.
So,
it goes back to communication then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I love your point about it's data.
Yeah.
It's not a threat, it's just information. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, that is. That's really key. So for anyone that's been identified with poor leadership skills, when might it be too late to try intervention with training or other support? And when might it, before being fired, does there come a point where the training, the support, all of that in the world isn't going to make any difference?
Yes, is a simple answer. But I think it's more nuanced than that. And you know, as an eternal optimist, I like to think that people have an infinite capacity for self-improvement. But I'm always surprised that that's proven not to be the case. However,
honest, I love that. This is what it's all about. This is the real world.
We can only try, right? And I think, you know, if you're the owner of that business or a leader of the business, and even if you're, you know, a junior member or a new member of the team, you have to sort of set the ground rules, right? And you have to have a red line where you say, no, I'm sorry, this is enough now. But if you don't communicate them, nobody knows. So it's about being, again, open and honest about saying, these are my kind of red lines here. It's not all about self and me. You know, I am prepared to kind of work hard, to take on board feedback, to move things forward. But others around you have to be doing the same. Otherwise, you've got, again, that misalignment, and it then creates that additional friction where people are pulling in different directions and different standards are being applied. So let's try and get on board with a lifelong learning approach. And, you know, again, coming back to that kind of humility, that team working, if we can create the culture that supports us all and benefits us all, then, you know, we can flourish here, or we can have an environment where none of us do, right? Yeah. So it can't be just all for one, where the leader takes all the credit for everyone's work and then disappears off to the holiday home. That's not a conducive environment or sustainable. And I think, you know, sustainability now is something where people think, oh, it's got to be about, you know, recycling rubbish. No. Well, no, like sustainability is also your culture, it's your mindset, it's your approach to learning and development.
Yeah,
that's true. So in that scenario, then, if somebody's having to receive kind of an intervention with training, how many chances do you give somebody?
Yeah, completely subjective, but I think you have to have the same rule applied to all.
That's true.
So currently, and I think that I've been very clear wherever I've worked, it's sort of a 3-strike system. I think that kind of, you know, the first time is a conversation, right? So we sit down and we explain, you know, this happened on this day, this was this is the impact of that. Do you understand? Do you recognize it? You know, can we have that conversation? Okay, this is what we need you to do next. This is what we need you to stop doing. So we talk about the behaviors and we talk about the impact.
Yes.
And that person can take that on board and they can try and apply those changes, or they can ignore it. But at that stage, it's just a conversation, but we'll kind of email it over, nice and sort of supportive, to say, this happened, we had the conversation, and this is the change we expect. And then we monitor. And that monitoring could happen for a day, but if there's another instance within the next sort of couple of months, you go, whoa, like, look, hang on. We had this conversation. Yeah. We'll kind of remind you that we had the conversation. Do you recognize this? Okay, well, unfortunately, this has happened again. And it's a very near or almost exact copy of what we spoke about, and we told you we were not prepared to accept that, and you said that you would make that change, but sadly that hasn't happened. So we then have to go into like a formal situation where, but it's still kind of handled reasonably informally. And I think on the next stage, it's where you have like a formal written warning, which is going to be on your record for a year. And that's kind of like pretty much, to me, getting to the final stages. At that point, we really, you know, we need to be sort of thinking about, is this individual really ever going to make that change? And do we want them involved with our team and our environment? Are we prepared to kind of take what the individual's bringing to the situation, or do we want to exit them and allow them to kind of maybe reflect and find something else to do with their career? And I think if you consistently apply that, you know, whether that, you know, is to performance, but also to behavior. And I think it's actually more important to have a behavior plan and a behavior process than it is almost, because when you think about the actual outputs in terms of like performance criteria, it's really nuanced again, because a lot of the control mechanisms could possibly sit outside that individual's sphere of influence. So therefore,
Yeah.
if you're in a challenging environment, the tax
Yeah.
regime has changed or the economy has taken a downturn, you don't want to be firing your sales team
No,
if they were
just
previously
because,
hitting targets, because
yeah.
actually the slump has happened and it's something that's an external factor. So again, it's about, is this appropriate, and is this aligned with what the business is trying to achieve? Is it a systemic situation or is it an individual situation?
I think it makes perfect sense. And I think I can see that very easily when it comes to teams. But when it's the leader who needs the performance review, I think that can be a bit harder, because I go back to this head of department where I just started at this college. Then there was the head of department, then there was the overall head of the whole kind of faculty. I think he was put on performance review because things weren't being marked, but he was able for the first couple of meetings to just blag his way through it. And as a leader supporting a leader, you want them to take the initiative and do it. So I do wonder whether you end up giving them more chances than the three, because you don't go into that formal disciplinary until it's really got to the...
It's really
the crux.
I think that's very much down to sort of timing and impact, and there's no sort of like one set way of getting this right. But I think as a general rule of thumb, I think whenever you're entering into this sort of situation, unfortunately, things are already probably looking pretty grim. The fact that you're having to sort of be here doing this sort of thing, so you want it wrapped up, I would suggest, in maximum sort of 3 months, because otherwise it just becomes painful for everybody. And I have heard of situations that have run for years, and I'm just like, what are you doing?
How is that?
Why does it take 2 years if you knew in month 1 or 2 that this individual was not a good fit and the impact they were having was so detrimental? Why has it taken 2 years to exit? Because that isn't great for the individual, and it's not great for everyone else in the organization either. It's better, I think it's that sort of like the sticking plaster approach. You can peel it off little bit, and it's super painful for ages and days, or you can just whip the thing off and let it heal. Yes, you might have some, a bit of pain and hollering for the first sort of 5, but it'll settle down. So, but that I think is where you get different personality types in organizations, or different kind of owners, leaders, saying they might be more cautious and less inclined to sort of take the bigger risk, although it might be over a much shorter period.
And I think it depends on the system you're in as well, because I know the NHS, for example, they will just move somebody along to a different department. So they've already caused havoc in one department, move them to another department, don't write them a reference, because they don't write references. All they do is they write a standard, turned up at this time, wasn't late, looks glowing. So
I think that's a classic in public sector, unfortunately, where it's just kicking the can down the road. I don't know why. I haven't worked in public sector, so I couldn't tell you, but I am aware that things seem to take years, as opposed to I think in private smaller organisations stuff gets wrapped up in weeks or maximum months. So I don't know why that kind of disparity exists, but I'm aware it does.
It's a problem with, I think, a system, and if you've learned how to play it, it can open the door to all kinds of other problems, because if you as the leader haven't followed the procedure correctly, you've opened yourself up to a disciplinary and a tribunal and all of those things. Well, we are we are keeping Rob, and we will be back after a tip from one of our previous guest experts.
And my own and my profession's culpability in pushing that agenda of discretionary effort, getting people to be motivated to do more, and I'm kind of undoing that for myself and in my own work. I would say if they're doing their jobs and they're doing them to the level expected and they're delivering what's expected, that's performance. That they are performing. I think that's not underperformance.
No.
I think in terms of, as you rightly pointed out, there are going to be those moments at various points, whether it's a crisis, whether it's a key point in the year, such as for accountancy, where you want and you need people, including yourself, to put that additional effort in. I think there are a number of things. You can't just expect them to do that. It's all the things that you've done before to create a culture where people feel supported and respected and looked after and valued. I use my own experience when I was a manager in local government. We had a big crisis. We had major floods in the area, and we had to evacuate 300 households overnight. We had to work with the army and all sorts.
Gosh.
I needed to switch my service because I was leading communications and digital services. We had to switch to a 24-hour,
Of course.
7 days a week service. Every single team member rolled their sleeves up and dug in, but it was everything
Yes.
that happened before that moment that meant they felt able to and were happy to step up. I also made sure that I rolled my sleeves up. I was working late hours as well to get stuff done. So I wasn't expecting them to do it and I wasn't doing it. We were all in it together. So it's not an easy answer, because this stuff that we're talking about isn't easy. We're talking about team culture. We're talking about how people feel. It's everything that you're doing so that when you have these pinch points, people are willing to do it temporarily.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. We are talking to Rob Stevens from Optix Solutions, and we are talking about leadership. We've just discussed previously bad leadership traits, good leadership traits, but also why it can be so difficult to remove a poor leader and the process in which we need to be able to do that. So now let's talk about, what about someone who has all the perfect situational, cultural leadership traits? It's brilliant. But then suddenly there's a culture shift. So suddenly you've got COVID, or suddenly someone's left, or suddenly the business goes in a different direction. And how do we support that person getting the help they need when they didn't actually sign up for the job that they've got? And they would have been good at the last job.
This is, something which is happening a lot now. I think with the current pace of change that is being driven by a lot of the AI technology, which is impacting so many different sectors and industries, the pace of change is just, well, to this point, unseen. Nobody's experienced this before. I know lots of people say, oh, well, we went through change and this and that, but things were changing on a cycle of perhaps, hundreds of years, a long time ago, to then perhaps, generational change. And then the pace of change was perhaps over 5 and 10 years as legislation would get updated or whatever. And now we're seeing change happening literally day by day.
That's true.
Which it is arguably almost humans that are unable to affect change on that scale and pace. So yes, there's going to be a lot of kind of uncertainty, a lot of kind of self-doubt coming in. But I think the reality is we're all in the same boat. So, but what evolution has taught us over millennia is that those who are able to evolve fastest, quickest, those who can handle change survive, and those who don't. And that's why we've got the kind of organisms and life structure on the planet today, and which is why probably 90+% of things over billions of years has actually died out, because they were not able to survive change. And humans, if we're not careful, this is my grim thought, we need to be really cognizant of the challenges AI presents as well as the opportunities, and we also have to be open-minded and sort of open to lifelong learning, because my granddad had one job, right? He went to the war, and had to kind of do his bit for Queen and country, and then came back, and he went back to the job that he had before, and then he did that job until he retired. So I remember talking to my granddad when he was still with us, and I think in my early 20s I was probably onto my third job or fourth, and he was just like, oh, Robert, no, like what, what. Yeah, and I was like, I was like crushed because why is he so just? I was like, no, I actually got a promotion, Grandad. It's a good thing, Like I've moved, I left, I've learned some new. And he was just like, no, just no, like this, like. I'm like, please, Grandad. You don't understand, but now, I think I'm looking at some of the data coming out, and people are changing roles every sort of like 1.5, 2 years, I think, in certain areas, which is a little kind of disturbing when it can potentially take 3 to 4 years to actually master anything. But given the advances in AI, do we need to master things? Because AI can give you all of the answers that you perhaps needed, and so can the internet, and we're so well connected now. So I think coming back to, the other side of things, which is human connection, leadership skills, the ability to communicate, to affect change, those skills are actually going to be very much sought after, but increasingly difficult to acquire and find in an individual. So how can a leader adapt? I think very much coming back to the things that I spoke about before, it's really honing your communication skills, really kind of being mindful of hubris, making sure that you do have, some people around you who you trust, who can actually help you keep your feet on the ground. Because when you start to achieve success, it's very easy to get carried away with yourself and become a different person. As you often hear people say, oh, they're not what they used to be.
Yes.
And since they got that promotion, they've completely changed. And like, no, it's still the same person. But perhaps, yes, perhaps they do have a different kind of drive now, or whatever it might be, or different kind of targets and goals, and they're not the same as yours that you shared when you two were together, having a coffee break and whatever. So people have to be allowed to change. People should change. We're not trees. We can't stay in one place forever because we'll wither and die. So we should always be looking to evolve, to grow, to learn. And I think the people who can put themselves in a leadership position and accept that change and embrace it will be fine. And those perhaps who aren't able to take on board feedback, aren't accepting to change, aren't prepared to learn, or just don't want to, I think you'll find opportunities are extremely limited in the coming years.
Yeah, I think that's very wise words, actually, to heed that, because you're absolutely right. AI is making changes in the work we do and what is needed out of the work we do, but it cannot replace emotional intelligence. It cannot replace emotional skills. It simulates emotional intelligence, but it is absolutely not showing the compassion and kindness and connectivity that people actually need to function well. So let's flip the script a little bit. What about a team who's been brought down by a toxic leader? So we're now in a situation where they've gone. Finally, they've gone. But this team is broken. How do you help them rebuild again? How do you help them find their confidence again?
And again, I think without sort of trying to put one solution down here, because it is incredibly complex, and each situation, each individual will be totally unique. So it's hard to give sort of one answer for this. But I think ultimately it's about trying to understand where that team is, what they've experienced. They need to go through sort of like a healing process. So you need to kind of air those demons and all of the kind of tragedy that perhaps they've been through. But they also need to do that on the understanding that that is it now, right? We will collectively move forwards. I don't want to be hearing this stuff in another 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. If that manager's left 2 years ago and we're still going on about, oh God, well, I can't do this because I feel so traumatized by, that manager that worked here 15 years ago. It's like, hang on, what? No, what? When? Like, I haven't even met them. What are you talking about? So let's try and keep things kind of relevant and realistic. But at the same time, we need to be open and honest about, yes, that was awful. And yes, we've moved forward. The business has kind of acted now, finally. It took us a few years, but they've gone. You then have to kind of say, well, what kind of environment do we want? Right, and you have to kind of almost recontract everyone back in. I know you've already got signed written contracts, but what I mean is there needs to be a team contract that they all sign up to and agree to say, this is the culture, this is the environment. We're not going to do these things. We are going to do these things. We're not going to treat each other like that. We will treat each other like this. So you'd get a nice big line on a whiteboard or whatever tool you might choose. and just start saying, we are not going to do these things, we will do these.
I love that.
And I think if
Yeah,
everyone
very
signed up to that and
positive.
agreed it, this doesn't have to be a massive meeting. You could literally do it in 15 minutes or half an hour, whatever time you've got. And then it's documented, we've all kind of signed in, recontracted. And it's then about boundaries. It's about kind of the leader or whoever it is stepping into that role, kind of policing those boundaries to say, well, hang on, you know, Janet's just stepped over there. We said we weren't going to do that. Can I just remind you and nudge you back? Yeah. And if it's done fairly, you know, and consistently, I think nobody really minds. That's kind of what we want from our leader, is like, you know, and also if somebody's shown you know, an exceptional self-awareness to help pick a team member up when perhaps they've been a bit down or they've gone above and beyond. We need to recognize and celebrate that and say, fantastic. You know, John did this wonderful piece of work where he recognized Janet was over here and she perhaps had some awful news at home. But guess what? You know, he's taken a moment to put an arm around and make sure, you know, she's kind of, you know, feeling really supported in the workplace, or perhaps, you know, can we take some workload off her for a moment? That probably stops her then going sick or feeling whatever, you know, anxious, depressed. And it's like, hang on. And work, when it's when we have that connection, it can be incredibly important, particularly if people are neurodivergent or they feel isolated or they don't have that kind of support. Work can become incredibly purposeful and empowering, and can be a real healer and motivator for individuals to actually then take themselves forward and better their lives, right? So I think that's when we get it right. So there's a huge advantage for getting these things right and for taking it seriously and putting time into affecting the change. So I hope that answers and wraps up.
No, that really does.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
And it's so true. Work can be so positive. I know it sounds like we're down on work. We're not. It has so many positive aspects, but sometimes people can make it problematic, and it's about dealing with those people.
Yeah, exactly. So you sort of described how a team might pick themselves up after, you know, a bad leader goes, but how easy then is it to change organisational culture? So if that needs to happen after a bad leader, where would you, well, you're given a really good place to start with a team. Yeah. So how might you translate that? Yes. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, you know, you've got to kind of be aware of the size of the challenge that might lay ahead of you. And also, where do you sit in that influencing kind of matrix? Because if you're employee number 10,996 and the other 10,995 people are more senior than you, you have honestly little to no chance of saying, you know, or affecting organizational change at the level that maybe needs to be done. But that doesn't mean you give up. You know, you can certainly kind of try and raise things appropriately. You can ask for a private meeting with your manager. You know, you can speak to HR. And yeah, I'm not saying don't be a champion and just walk out, but I think ultimately let's be realistic and honest about the situation, because, you know, I wouldn't recommend anyone stays somewhere where they're unhappy. I think that's just completely crazy. I think the responsibility massively shifts, though, if you're the chairman of that organisation, or the chairperson, or if you're on the board in any way, or you're a significant investor, then you absolutely should be paying full attention to the organisational culture and the impact, good and bad, of how leaders are operating within the organisation. So, you know, there's some very large institutional investors who have incredible amounts of power within the organizations, but are not, well, in my experience, taking any consideration or care into what is going on. So, but on the flip side, you have some very progressive organizational investors, you know, who absolutely do want to kind of know what's going on and where's the money being spent, and what is the 5-year leadership plan, and what are our beliefs and values, and how do they get manifested by our leadership team and our C-suite. And they do hold people to account, and that's brilliant. So there's some fantastic examples of when this works well. I think, unfortunately, they are sort of quite lonely examples, because ultimately, I think in our world right now, profit is sort of king, And we all seem to have bought into consumerism, if you excuse the pun, and we all want nice things, and we want the nice homes, and we want our holidays, and we want to be able to kind of eat out and enjoy trips with friends, and we all want nice clothes and whatever adornment, and so okay, you kind of got to go along with it to some extent, but that doesn't mean it excludes and excuses poor behaviors and poor leadership. So I think you can align both, but it's about, again, honesty, integrity. I think if your organization is one that purely puts profit before people and profit before planet, well, own it. Just own it.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with you.
Just be like, well, that's us. That's what we do, right? I'm not going to give an example of an organization that does that because it's probably not fair. But there are other organizations that are very much about planet. They are very much about people. And again, great. And you as an individual, whether you're a leader or a mid-level manager, or whether you're just starting your career, you need to find out what matters to you, and then you need to find the organization that is aligned with your beliefs and your values, and then that's where you get the synergy, and that's where progress happens. And I think you'll find a much better and rewarding career, as opposed to railing against an organization that completely has a complete disparity with your own values, beliefs, and ways of being, because you're never, if you're starting out your career, you're never going to change that environment. And should you even try, again, that's when you talk about, are there good leaders, bad leaders? I think sometimes it's probably more accurate where leaders are just misplaced.
Yes,
let's
misplaced
say.
leaders. I like that.
They're just not in the right environment. They're not in the right situation for their own personal beliefs and values. And so as soon as you kind of pull them and drop them in, all the kind of magic seems to happen when you have that alignment. So I think it's about finding out, have you got a match? And if you haven't, let's be really honest and say that, and just move on.
Yeah, good point. So if you have a leader that needs intervention, what would you say is the most effective form? I mean, we hear and we talk a lot about coaching and mentoring, training. What do you think would work best?
So, having been in this situation myself, it's always better when the individual approaches you from a place of kindness and consideration, and is mindful of the impact that, if we go in with the intent that this leader's here to do good and is a good person, and they're obviously trying their best. So I'm not going to go in with an accusatory tone. I'm not going in to try and remove them from the organization. I'm going to this conversation to have an equal meeting to try and elicit a positive response and change. Then the chances are better. I'm not saying it's going to create that positive change, but they're better. You've got better odds, that approach, I believe, and with personal experience, than you have going in heavy-handed, where you might say, right, we're going to send you a formal letter. You've got to come to the meeting. By the way, you might want to speak to your union rep, or probably have a chat with a lawyer before you turn up. And we're going to have HR turn up, and we're going to have and then you're thinking, oh my God, because, if you have got those commitments, mortgages, children, whatever, caring responsibilities, you're not going in to fight for yourself. You're going to be thinking about all of the other responsibilities and commitments you've got. And so, everyone lawyers up, everyone's backs, all the walls and barriers come up, and you can't then have the conversation that needs to be had, which is actually what we're really trying to talk to you about is this. And but often these are like the unintended consequences of the mechanisms we've created, and especially in a larger organization, they're not very good at having what I would sort of describe as a mentoring or coaching conversation.
No, I think that's it. I think that's the thing, because coaches, trainers and mentors, or everyone is actually very open to having those conversations, but it's the way it's approached in the first instance that makes the difference. And then it's, again, maybe people, horses for courses after that.
Yeah, that's
really, really helpful.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Where can we learn more about you, Rob?
Oh gosh. So you'll find me online. You know, you can Google me, Robert Stevens or Rob Stevens. You can find me with my consultancy organization, which is WaveMind, where I put a lot of my leadership kind of principles and beliefs, out to the public. So you can follow WaveMind. You can also grab me at Optix, where I'm managing director of a marketing agency. I'm also out in the third sector as a trustee with a number of charities. So you will find me. I am
You're
here
there.
and around. I'm in London a lot, or I'm in the Southwest. But yeah, and happy to kind of talk to people, and especially around this kind of topic around affecting kind of change and helping people just do their best work. So yeah, happy to have those conversations.
Love
Brilliant.
that. I love that. It
Yeah.
is. It's about helping people do their best work.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Rob, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and we look forward to chatting with you again in future.
That's been great. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you. We will head over to Test the Trend. For today's Test the Trend, I want to give you a reading recommendation, and you can download this paper on Google, so it is possible to access. It is called Skilled Incompetence, and it's by a writer called Chris Argyris. Now, what Chris talks about is a behaviour that leaders who should not be in leadership have. It's the same manipulation that Rob was talking about earlier. So he calls it skilled incompetence, and he gives two examples. He gives more, but two stand out to me. Examples of some of the behaviours you might see, because he says people are skilled in being incompetent. In other words, they're really manipulative, really skilled. They can't do the job, but they do things to make it look like other things are stopping them doing the job. So they're skilled in their incompetence. So one of the examples is, he calls it clearing deck chairs on the Titanic. And this is when those leaders look busy. They look really busy. They're always in a rush. They're always doing something. But when you ask them what they're actually doing, it's like clearing deck chairs on the Titanic. They're doing all the jobs that don't actually need to be done, rather than the job that really needs to be focused on. So that's one pattern to look out for. And the second pattern is leaving it in the drawer, which is exactly what it says. You will go to that person, speak to them about, this is the issue, this is what's going on, and they'll go, yeah, I'm gonna put that in the drawer. I'm gonna, it's at the top of my drawer. I will come to it. Except they shut the drawer and they don't do anything about it. So if you recognise that your manager is doing a load of things which are completely unnecessary, or that you have raised issues with them, but somehow things are not being done, then the first thing you need to do is keep a record of it. Keep a record of when you raise those issues. And then, if you need to, look for the person above them or speak to HR. And if you've been doing this, there is a chance that other people have been doing it as well. So keeping your own records is really important, and finding somebody else to speak to. Now, admittedly, this will mean your direct manager who hasn't been doing their job may well get defensive and angry when they're spoken to by somebody else. But at the same time, if you've got that evidence, remember it's data, you can say, well, I did raise this with you. I didn't go above your head, but because things weren't done, I needed to find out when it could be done. So keeping your own records is really important. Raising it is also important. And sometimes having to raise it above that leadership person, that might have to happen too. Well, I think that is a topic that resonates with everybody out there. We've all had terrible leaders, but we also had good ones.
Yes, definitely, yes.
Let's end on a positive then. What behaviours would you say a good leader had, or in your experience, or maybe you've seen them, or what would you say is really positive?
The best leaders I've ever had are those that set out the job. This is what you're going to do.
Yeah, explain it, yeah.
And then they just let you do it. And that's it. And they say, I'm here if you have any issues.
Yeah.
And providing everything's done first of all, and done in a good enough time frame, or the manager will either come back to you and say, why haven't you done it yet, or they'll be happy. But Yeah,
Yeah.
those. So they
agree
just
with you.
trust you to do the job.
Yes.
And then that's done, and they give you something else, and then they're there in an office, or at the end of the phone if you need them.
Yes.
But they're not constantly on your shoulder.
Yes, and not micromanaging you.
Exactly.
No, absolutely. Because my editor Eloise is superb. She knows. I will present the next chapter to her in 2 weeks' time or whatever it is. If I haven't presented it, she will drop me an email.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I'm usually ahead of time. Gives me feedback straight away. It's a very, everyone understands the process.
Yes.
It's about that, isn't it?
I think that's exactly it. Yeah. And so a good leader is there, and they'll know what's going on.
Yes.
But they don't have to be there.
Yeah.
They just as long as they're monitoring it from afar.
And it's a similar thing, because when you become a leader, you also have to be looking at your business and growth and vision and those sorts of skills.
Yes.
You actually don't want to be micromanaging people. And if you are, then you've got a real problem with the whole visionary aspect of it.
Well, exactly. And clearly don't have enough to do. I'm thinking about managers that have micromanaged. They haven't clearly got enough to do, because if they've got time to micromanage you, they should.
Why have they got time?
Exactly. Do they want your job?
Yeah.
That's what I always think. If you want my job, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, and it brings me back to another training session I was delivering in the NHS, where it was a woman who had been promoted into a leadership position. She really didn't want it. She wanted to be on the wards.
Oh, interesting.
And she found it was great, because actually the session that I delivered helped her see that. And she, I think, has actually gone back to wards, which is fulfilling for her.
Yeah,
Some
of course.
people don't want to be leaders, and that's okay.
No, and we also need good nurses and good
exactly.
practitioners.
Yes. That's exactly it. So I think clarity, really important. Letting people do their job, also really important, which also means hiring correctly
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
So there's that too.
Yeah.
Praise, I think, is another thing. Recognising when people do
True.
a good job.
True. Yes, I hadn't thought about that, but that is really important.
And it goes a lot further than we realise, I think. So that's a good one as well. Being personable. If you say your door's open and you're approachable, you better be.
Yeah. True. Very true.
But then that sits with being genuine as well. And why can't we all just do that?
Exactly. It sounds easy.
Sounds so straightforward.
Yeah, it does.
So if you can think of why you might have struggled with that, or had problems doing that, or you've seen people have problems doing that, do put it in the comments, and we will read it out on another show, because we are going to be having a chat with Felicia Jones about this in a later episode, about recovery from a toxic work environment. So do tune in for that as well. Meanwhile, catch us if you're watching us on TV, listen to us on podcast, and from all of us here at Mental Health Matters, have a healthy week.